What is up? I had to do some gay serial killers for Pride, so here you go with the first one. It's Dennis Nilsen. Born on November 23rd, 1945, Dennis Nilsen is one of the UK's most prolific serial killers. Between the years of 1978 and 1983, Dennis Nilsen had killed 12 to 15 young men and boys. Growing up in Scotland, he had a pretty normal childhood, that is until he was about 8 years old, and his mother asked him if he wanted to come into the other room and say hello to his grandpa. When he got in there was a box and his grandpa was inside. He had no idea he was dead. He would later say that this was the start of his obsession with death. When he got a little older, he joined the army and then later left it, saying that it was because of homophobia. But while in the army, he began loving photography, and he would often make the other soldiers pretend to be dead so he can take pictures of them. Before I begin, I want to give you a heads up. What I'm about to tell you is some pretty graphic shit. I am about to get into a little bit of detail about his first victim, so just beware. On the morning of New Year's Day in 1979, 33-year-old Dennis Nilsen woke up next to a teenage boy. He claimed that he became fascinated with the way the boy looked while he was sleeping, and he couldn't bear the thought of him leaving him. That's when he grabbed a necktie, put it around the boy's neck, and pulled. Nilsen then took the body into the bathroom, stripped it naked, and then bathed it. He claimed to have been taking care of the body by bathing it regularly, putting different clothes on it, having conversations with it, and watching television with it. But when he couldn't take the smell anymore, he decided to put the body under his floorboards for about 8 months. After that, he took the body out through the French doors out to the garden that only he had access to. That's where he set fire to the body and then scattered the ashes and any of the bone fragments that may not have disintegrated in the fire. The boy turned out to be 14-year-old Stephen Holmes. He was not identified until 2005. While living in this specific location, he continued to do this to about 9 more young boys and men, and keeping their bodies as company for a while. However, not all of his victims died. There were actually a few people that survived him. Come back for part 3 to hear those stories. A heads up on this one, I do talk about strangulation and I talk about murder still and dead bodies and all of that good shit. So there's your warning. In May of 1982, Carl Stoddard, who was a drag performer, was invited back to Dennis Nilsen's flat for some drinks after a night out. Nilsen came off as very kind and thoughtful, and the two ended up sleeping together. Once Dennis was behind Carl, he began strangling him with an unknown object. As soon as Carl stopped breathing, Dennis assumed that he was dead and dragged him to the bathroom where he began preparing the body to bathe it. Then he realized that Carl was still alive, so he jumped into hero mode and began giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and brought him back to life. Once Carl woke up, he had no idea what the fuck just happened to him, and of course he believed Dennis when he said it was an accident, because who wants to think that somebody just tried to kill you? Carl stayed at Nilsen's flat for 3 days, and then he let him live. Nilsen went on to do this to 3 more men, trying to get them as close to death as possible and then bringing them back to life to come off as their savior. At this point, he lived at 23 Cranley Garden, which was a flat on the top floor in a building. On February 9th of 1983, a plumber was called to this certain address to check the drains for a clog. While searching for the source of the clog, he was hit with the smell of death, and he found what looked to be human flesh. Investigators were able to track the clog back up to the flat 23D, which belonged to Dennis Nilsen. As they told him the reason for their visit, he allowed them to come into his flat where they were hit with the smell of death, and they looked at him and said, "Where are the bodies at, dude?" And he said, "In the other room in a trash bag." The remains of a total of 3 men were scattered around the flat. This included, in the black bags, there were 2 decapitated heads, amongst other body parts. There was a chest in the room, and inside of that, there was a human torso. And in the bathroom under the sink, there was a pair of legs and a pelvis. While in custody, he confessed to all 15 of his murders in great detail, and even admitted to boiling some of the heads to get the flesh off of it, while he drank rum and coke and had a cigarette. He was convicted of 6 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Even though he confessed to everything, he pled not guilty on every count. However, the court saw right through his bullshit. He was convicted, found guilty, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Dennis Nilsen died on May 12, 2018 from a pulmonary embolism at the age of 72. Only 5 people attended his memorial service, and 3 of them were prison guards.